How did you acquire this land on which now you live as your own autonomous home?
We bought it in 1991.
So you bought it from the government?
Yes.
I see. Before Orania, you were living just like any other white communities, neighborhood and stuff, right?
Yes.
What is the one thing you could not have done if you didn't move to Orania?
That's a good question.
If not because of Orania. Which one do you think is fair? Are you a segregationist? Are you an extended apartheid? Are you a racist? Which one is fair to describe what Orania is?
But if I had to describe our project in my own terms, I would say a new alternative.
Are you communist? Are you socialist? Are you capitalist? What are you?
Guys, so I think this is one of Joost Strydom's best videos on his articulation of the whole Orania project globally. And I usually argue that South Africa is so theoretically dense that, you know, I think only a really dense academic kind of discussion can unravel the complexities that actually encapsulate what South Africa represents in these modern times. And I think this is where Franck Zanu comes in. I really appreciate this conversation. If you're South African, you must be patient enough to watch this video till the end, because the whole thing with Orania, I've actually been saying it that I won't be surprised if it gets to the level of the African Union at some point, because it's a really complicated, complex case that we all have to understand and grasp. And the legitimacy of its existence on the African continent, it's something that has to really be understood. And I think this is where Franck Zanu comes in. Franck Zanu has this really laser-pointed questions that you really don't understand what this video has actually done today, but many years to come we would understand. And as you know, Joost Strydom explains from the history to the ideology to the economics, what the whole Orania thing represents. I think it's a really powerful discussion. One of the parts that actually struck me was how, you know, in his response to what really Orania's economy represents. Is it capitalist? Is it communist? That would be a question that really academics like me would actually be interested in. What kind of community, what kind of economic system is this? How is it running? That it has, in 34 years, has been able to achieve a sewage system that actually operates away from the state's kind of like structures. It has actually, he argues that it's 50% energy independent, away from the state's electricity or energy supplies. Many other breakthroughs within this small community on the African soil. How is this a communist system? Is this a capitalist? What kind of, is this a socialist system? These are the kind of questions you would expect from an academic. I think really few academics like Franck Zanu will be able to ask this laser pointed question, and the response from Joost actually blew me away. As a historian, I've studied pre-colonial history, African historian, I've studied pre-colonial history. And even when you read the papers from Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, he would actually argue that the ancient African society practiced communitarianism. Communitarianism, not communism now, communitarianism. And Joost Strydom argues that his articulation of Orania's system is communitarianism. So is Orania actually now trying to point Africa back to its past? Or, I really don't understand. It's a complex discussion. You can't miss it. If you really love South Africa, you have to watch till the end, because if Joost Strydom is right, he's arguing that Orania and the whole setup with Orania wants to represent a kind of what he calls a model, so to speak. But I don't really understand. Like, are they building a model based on an ancient African ideology for communitarian planning and all that, for community planning and all that, that is still really being pushed, but the only difference now is the color of the skin? Bro, I'm not going to say too much. Let's just quickly listen to this real powerful discussion between Franck Zanu and Joost Strydom, one of the main leaders of the Orania movement in South Africa, and share your thoughts in the comments.
Okay, so this is the most interesting question that I have faced, and they want me to ask you. And I think the viewers will be happy to hear this, because when you say the word land, and you occupy a land,
yes.
that is a red flag in South Africa,
yes.
because one of the accusations is that land was taken away from the indigents.
Yes.
So take us back to the story. Make it short, sweet. How did you acquire the land? How big is the land? And maybe mileage, Americans use still the mileage in a square foot, okay, so we can understand the size. So one, how did you acquire this land on which now you live as your own autonomous home?
Okay.
How big is it? What did you pay for it? And who gave you the authority to own that land and say, we can only live here?
Okay, very important question. Very tough question to answer shortly because it's a question with so many layers, it's like an onion. I could speak for 20 minutes just on this because it's so important, not only in the Orania sense, but in the broader South African sense. Very, very important. Firstly, let's say, where is the land?
Yes.
The land was very specifically chosen in one of the most undesirable parts of South Africa, the Karoo region. It's semi-desert. It rains between 250 and 300 millimeters per year. Very low rainfall, not a lot to do there. So it's also the lowest populated part of South Africa, the Karoo. So it's most scarcely populated. Second thing is, where did we get the land? We bought the land through a commercial transaction as a private property acquisition.
Okay.
So we bought it. We bought it in 1991. It was a piece of land which was abandoned. There was a project to house workers. It's like a temporary workers' camp. To house workers who built some of the important infrastructure. The Van der Kloof Dam, it used to be called the PK Leroux Dam. So the guys who built that, they stayed there, was stationed there for a while to complete the work, got abandoned. The government actually tried then to give or the Department of Water Affairs, tried to give the land to the police or the army or corrective services, someone that they thought could use it. No one was interested because it's too secluded. And we say, wait, that's exactly what we want. If we can get a secluded piece of land, which no one else wants because it's dry, it's arid, it's not popular. We don't have the gold mines from the far north. We don't have the beautiful vineyards of the Cape. We don't have the high rainfall of KwaZulu-Natal. We don't have the beautiful agricultural lands of the Free State. But we can do something here. We can create a space here. And then we bought it in 1991. Scraped the bottom of the barrel to raise the funds. People bought in also, I think, an act of faith and raised enough money to buy it. And then, so I don't know what the size is in square miles. I know in hectares.
Yeah.
In hectares, it's about 10,000 hectares all in all.
10,000.
Yes.
Hectares.
So a hectare is 100 meters by 100 meters.
Right.
What is 300 feet by 300 feet?
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Ah. Okay. So when you say we bought, the 91 was the ANC government, right?
No, it was not yet. It was in the transitional phase.
Oh, that's correct. 94. Okay, that's correct.
Yeah.
So you bought it from the government.
Yes.
I see.
Yes.
So the government says yes, people can buy a land, and okay. So I was reading.
So what they actually, sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify this. What they actually did is they struggled to find a buyer because they wanted to sell it to another government agency. As I said, corrective service, people who could train there. I think at one stage they offered it to some old parliamentaries for a retirement village. They weren't interested because it was too secluded.
Okay.
And then they didn't start selling it. They put it out on a public tender process. Anyone could tender to try and buy the land. We did not win the tender. Someone else did, which could then not pay. And they didn't have enough money at the end of the day. And they made a higher bid but couldn't pay. We were second highest. Fell on us and we could pay and went through. Yeah.
Okay, here's the question. Before Orania, you were living just like any other white communities, neighborhood and stuff, right?
Yes.
What is the one thing you could not have done if you didn't move to Orania by living among the general public? Let me call it so.
Yeah.
What is it that you, the people who are now in Orania, what is it you couldn't have done?
That's a good question.
If not because of Orania.
It's a good question. Actually, I think, to be honest, many white South Africans still made quite successful economic lives. Since, especially in the early 2000s and the 2010s, there were still opportunities, but the opportunities got carved away. So I think maybe the pioneers who moved to Orania lost a lot of opportunities. They lost the opportunity to access the great schools that were still available. They lost the opportunities to make a lot of money. Just as a clarification, who moves out to a town in the middle of nowhere in a semi-desert environment? Well, it was people who could envision the idea, and who could do that? Mostly academics. You had doctors, you had lawyers, you had professors. They were the ones who moved out. They could see the potential of Orania, and they could to some extent see the future, and that made the decision. There was no other reasons to attract them there. Okay, so what could we not have? I think, to put it bluntly, what we could not have is the opportunity to share in building what we are building. Economically, you could have opportunities in the rest of the country still up, and there's many other things that you can do. You actually missed out on some of those moving there. However, what we do have, our competitive advantage, is the ability to share in this plan to create a space where Afrikaners can make decisions for themselves, to put it in the shortest possible phrase.
So in my mind, when I say Joost Strydom, which is you, and the Orania project, I'm confused on what label to use, right? So some people have thrown these words around. Which one do you think is fair? Are you a segregationist? Are you an extended apartheid? Are you a racist? Which one is fair to describe what Orania is? What is it?
Well, we should, all of those. But if I had to describe our project in my own terms, I would say a new alternative.
Repeat that.
A new alternative.
Okay.
A third position. We are a third position. We try to remove ourselves from the noise of just the duality of options and put ourselves in a third position. What does that entail? That does entail we fully recognize that we are Afrikaners and we like to preserve our heritage and continue being. And we fully recognize that new options needs to be explored, that the cliche politics that we are stuck in is not going to solve anything. And thirdly, I think is the most interesting thing, which changed the whole picture, which changed Orania from any other community in South Africa. The most liberal white people in South Africa have not made this one change that we as the Orania community made. It is revolutionary. It is so strange in the African context that very few African people actually understand it or understand that Orania is busy with that. It is so unknown in South Africa that many people think it is born out of something that it is not. And that is what we call one of the three principles of Orania, the principle of own labor.
The principle of own labor.
Own labor.
Self-reliance.
Working yourself.
Which is self-reliance, kind of.
Yeah, self-reliance.
Okay.
But in South Africa, the political situation for the past 150 years has been dictated by labor policy. And one of the things that many African people in South Africa are angry at the Afrikaner for is the fact that labor created different classes of people under the previous regime. And that is why I don't buy into many of these stories about the previous regime, because the population growth under African people during the previous regime in South Africa was vast. And the reason for that is the state needed labor. While the Afrikaner and the Boer people were for a very, very long time very self-reliant people who could work very hard, under the previous regime, the need for industrialization, farming, forestry and those things wanted as many as possible, as large as possible growth in the black population for the reason of cheap labor. That is still the reality in South Africa. Only Orania as a community, as a collective said, we will not exploit people just as laborers. The previous regime had these labor demands and did not give people voting rights, and that was an imbalance which we also experienced under the English, so we understand something of it. Orania says, we will do our own work. We will not take the cheaper option of cheap foreign labor as it is described in our context. We will not take the option of cheap exploitation. We will do our own work exclusively. And I don't know how many of your viewers are actually familiar with South Africa. That precise labor relationship is still very much
So you would say the appropriate term for you to be described is the new alternative.
the new alternative. I
And
hope
that
so.
new alternative. Now, let me ask you: the Orania community, the economy, the social structure, the politics. Are you communist? Are you socialist? Are you capitalist? What are you?
Once the ANC visited Orania, well, it was COSATU. It was one of the tri-party alliance which was associated with the ANC. It would be very strange for people to hear that COSATU was in Orania. They visited us, and they saw our community and they said, you know, after they did a tour of the town, they said, you know, we speak about socialism. You live socialism. And we could not believe our ears, because in our minds that's not what we're doing. We are not socialists. And why did they say it? Because they saw communitarianism. They saw people voluntarily give their labor, their time, and their resources to help the community. But what is the difference between that and socialism? We are not forcing the people. We're not forcing our citizens to give on a socialist basis. I would say the system that we are the closest to maybe is a free market system.
Okay.
I don't want to say just capitalism. The reason for that is as follows. A capitalist system would prioritize cheap labor.
Okay.
And we are not doing that. Communist, we are not. Socialist, we are not.
So your new political language you just use, you are what?
Oranianism, communitarianism.
Communitarianism.
Communitarianism. It's voluntary. And as in a capitalist system, in a free market system, the flow of money
So
is
it's a
voluntary.
communitarianism, you give to the community, but you don't depend on the government.
Yes.
That's the difference between socialism and
Yes.
communitarianism.
Can I give a practical example in action? One of the challenges we face is that Afrikaners from around South Africa want to come to Orania because they are in dire straits economically. They lost their jobs. They may be under a lot of pressure in terms of housing and things like that. They come from bad socioeconomic environments, and they want to come to Orania as a way out. So a capitalist would say, you know, get a job, get home. Socialist would say the state and other taxpayers' money must provide home.
Provide for you.
Orania says, okay, well, what we're going to do is, that's our people. We love our people. We want to help our people. But we don't want to increase dependency on the state, the local government of Orania. So how can we help them without forcing any of the other Oranians to be forcibly to pay taxes to support these people? Well, let's make it voluntary. So we start, the toughest sector is housing. So housing is one of the highest barriers to entry in Orania. So what we did is we started subsidized housing, which is not managed by the government, by the local government, but managed by internal organization. And anyone who wants to contribute to the housing, subsidized housing, does it voluntarily. If you contribute, it's subsidized for the people who are in a difficult situation, but they must still pay their part as well. That's also important. If they don't pay their part, they become more dependent, not less. They must still pay their part, but voluntary donations carries them. And that is communitarianism.